One of the first questions we have for you, Chief and Deputy Chief, is a lot of people come here from California, and the whole idea of turning right on red still rankles some of them, but turning left on red is just really something that they're not used to. And even if you give them a pleasant honk and some kind of hand gesture, they still don't really want to turn left on red. Can you just generally tell us, Deputy Chief Hamilton, what are the rules about turning left on red, traffic rules here in the state of Oregon?
Well, unless it's otherwise posted, the easiest rule to remember is that if you only have to look one direction to check for traffic, then a left turn on a red is legal. So for instance, if you're on, say, M Street and you're heading towards like the All Sports Park, and you're at that red light, you only have to look to the right or the northbound to see the 6th Street traffic, which is one direction. As long as you only have to look one way and it's not posted where other traffic has the right of way, then you're legal to make that left turn on a red. Just like a right-hand turn.
That's great.
Yeah,
I like that. If you look, yeah, great.
You're crossing somebody who has right of way, and you can't do that.
Yeah, I always have that dilemma at the upper end of 7th Street, say at Evelyn, if I'm going to go to Hong Kong for dinner or something like that, and I come off of there, and you know the light is red, and you go, well, this is perfectly safe to make this turn, and I always wait for the light because I don't want to do anything stupid.
Yeah, yeah. As long as you're looking one direction, you're okay. Like I said, the thing that you got to watch for is make sure that it's not posted. There's not a special intersection where, even though your light is red, if traffic coming towards you has right of way, then you just have to be careful of that. So obviously the arrows would be the issue. If there's a turn arrow, you need to comply with that.
Okay, turn arrow. So glad you said that. So if you come up to some intersections, it may hold the traffic back from going straight ahead. I'm thinking near Freddy's, for example, or near Walmart. And there's a left arrow. It's a protected left, is the way I think of it. And maybe that left arrow is, they're all red, and then the left arrow turns green while the others are red. Okay, so you can make your left turn because of a protected left, because the left arrow is saying yes, you can. Now here's the question. If you come up to an intersection and all of them are red, including the left arrow, do you treat that as a left turn is not permitted, or it's a red light and it is permitted?
Well, without knowing where that would apply, my thought would be that red arrow is going to basically signify that specific turn cannot be made, because somewhere along the line it has right of way. Without knowing which intersection or who has right of way in the intersection you're talking about, if it's red, you cannot make that left turn there, because there's going to be other opposing traffic or cross traffic that would have right of way at that intersection.
Okay, so if go ahead, Mike.
We both have a question on this. Like if you are on M Street and you're going to turn onto 6th, to go, back across the bridge, there's an arrow light there. So if that light is red, you can't. That turn is not permitted.
Well, yeah.
That's because you have oncoming traffic.
Yeah, because you have oncoming traffic, that's the issue with that one. So if it's red for traffic that's going the same direction as you across 6th Street, and your light is red, you'd be able to make that left because you're only looking one direction. But if there's traffic, if there's a green light for traffic that's going straight and you're in that turn lane that's red, you can't make that turn because the opposing traffic has right of way.
Right. Oh yeah, one can only hope that no one's going to say, I saw this on the show and it said I could go. That's why I got in an accident. No, we're not talking about people, endangering people that are going to run into you. But if you're sitting there, let's say by yourself, it's midnight or something, yeah, I know the rules apply around the clock. But if it's a red light and there's nobody coming and it is safe to do it, which is the general rule anyway, and you've got a red arrow, then people just want to be sure, I want to be sure, that it's okay to turn left on a red arrow if it's safe to proceed.
Yeah, at that intersection it is. You're okay to turn there because you're only having to check for traffic really that one direction, and if there's nobody else that's there, you're safe to make that turn.
That's great. Okay. Now, is it true, gentlemen, that some people say at the state of Oregon, I talked to an ODOT guy about this one time, hopefully he knows what he's talking about. He said that when you see a yellow light coming up, really, just stop. Really? Yellow means stop now? What does it mean in the city of Grants Pass?
Well, it actually means that you no longer have right-of-way. And it's basically, as we all know, trying to indicate that the light's about to turn red, which certainly means you have no right-of-way to enter the intersection. Generally, yellow lights are timed for a 3 to 5 second range to allow motorists who are doing the speed limit to either clear the intersection or come to a proper stop prior to entering the intersection. So, as a rule, about if the light has turned yellow and your vehicle is approaching the intersection, since you no longer have right-of-way, it's prudent to stop the vehicle. There can be exclusions or exceptions such as bad weather, where you have freezing conditions, excessive water, people not feeling comfortable to try to attempt to stop. But the idea is to get people to be able to clear the intersection before the light actually turns to red.
Yeah, and we've
so
all...
is there any...
Go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is there likelihood in that situation that a cop is going to pull you over and say, hey, you didn't do the right thing at the yellow light back there? Because, it's kind of a cliche thing that, I mean, when I was a kid, I remember that my dad, when the light turned yellow, that's when you put the foot to the floor.
Well, and as you know, that when we track crash statistics, our job is to try to reduce crashes and make the roadways safe for everybody to travel on. So we certainly don't want to get into just a line of demarcation saying, that we shouldn't be looking at that. We want to make sure that people are aware of the law and they're educated and they understand why we have yellow lights, what they're timed for, what it actually means. You could have someone that did have time to stop, tried to make it through the intersection, feels like the crosswalk is the, drag strip line, I guess you could say, and so hits the accelerator, and yet the light is turning red as they're entering or going through the intersection. And you have other people who sometimes are trying to jump the light going the other direction, and so we end up with crashes that way. And that's our goal, to educate people as to how some of these crashes happen so that we can prevent crashes in the future.
That's smart. And of course, the general rule is just, would you try to be safe, please? Okay, we got that. Some of these are bigger questions, others are smaller ones. So here I am at Fred Meyer. I'm coming out of there and I'm leaving. And Fred Meyer has in their parking lot a stop sign before you make the right turn, and then right down near the road they have another Fred Meyer stop sign. These aren't city signs, are they? I mean, do I really have to obey a Fred Meyer stop sign or get in trouble?
Well, I certainly don't want to speak for Fred Meyer, but I can tell you that in the state of Oregon, our jurisdiction is on public roadways, and for some crimes or traffic-related offenses, premises open to the public, which can be parking lots. However, as far as traffic control devices, we don't have jurisdiction regarding people obeying or following that. The exception to that, however, is that with or without a stop sign leaving, let's say, a parking lot such as Fred Meyer, there is a requirement to stop a motor vehicle prior to entering the roadway so you can ensure it's safe to do so.
Absolutely.
So whether a stop sign doesn't exist, leaving a parking lot onto a public roadway, there is a requirement to stop prior to that.
One time in their parking lot, I went through the stop sign because there wasn't anybody, and one of the bagger guys, he was pushing a young lady from inside the store in one of those carts, and she had a rotating red light on the top, and they tried to pull me over, and I said, I'm not stopping for these guys.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd say to remember, even with parking lots having traffic control devices, their goal also is to safely allow motorists in and out of the parking lot as well as pedestrians coming in and out of the stores. So there's still a good rule there to follow those. I'm just speaking in terms of enforcement and what we can and can't do.
Mike, did you have any follow-up on that question?
Oh, no, that's a good question, because I had wondered that a number of times myself, in that specific parking lot. Hey, there's all these signs, and, if nobody's there, I'm guilty. I've run those stop signs a couple of times when there was literally nobody there and it was perfectly safe to do what I did.
And that's when you could have instances where then crimes or violations start to apply, such as reckless endangering, careless driving, things like that, where in a premises open to the public, you created an unsafe hazard that could have injured somebody or something. So that's when it starts to get a little bit gray as far as where it becomes a police matter or a private property matter.
Okay. Deputy Chief Hamilton, we have all heard, and some of us know people who have been cited recently, relatively recently, for driving faster than 20 miles an hour past a construction zone. And what we've heard is there was actually somebody there that was taking a step out onto the road to see if people would stop, and then they were cited. You can tell us if that's a true story or apocryphal, but one of the questions that I have is, okay, we all want to be safe around construction zones. Why? Of course. But if it's 8 o'clock at night and there's nobody there and things aren't extending out into the roadway, or we've all seen it too, where for some reason the construction guys decide to take a 2 or 3 week break and their construction stuff is still there and they still have orange tape and they still have the cones and everything, do we really need to shut down to 20 miles an hour when there's absolutely nobody there?
Well, in answer to your first question about the person stepping out into the roadway and that part about a construction zone, I'm not familiar with an operation like that. Could something like that be there? It certainly could be, but I've never heard of that. As far as the work zones go, if it's a posted highway work zone, those are in effect from the time they post it until they pull it. So it doesn't matter what the time of day is, and part of the reason for that is, like we talked about earlier, for safety reasons. There could be part of that area that's being ground down, or it's missing part of the surface or the shoulders, basically been dug up, and it becomes a safety issue. The reason roads are designed the way they are and engineered is to allow for a cushion for errors. Basically, if a driver does something goofy, then you don't have a crash. There's room for a mistake to be made sometimes. And if you look at the work zones, they generally tend to be smaller lanes, less shoulder. Usually there's a concrete barrier or something there that can be a obvious hazard, and you don't want to try an airbag test up against those concrete jam barriers because they usually win. So part of the reason that law is in effect anytime the construction zone is designated, it is that way 24/7, just because of those safety factors. So it may not be a 20 zone. I know on the highways it generally drop you down to like 55 or 50, depending on how the surface is and what it is they're doing in that area. But by the statute, if a construction zone is basically designated, it's a construction zone 24/7.
Wow. You have anything to say about that, Mike? There's nobody there. Maybe there's nobody there for 2 or 3 weeks, and you're required to slow down to 20.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that because they're constricting the roadway a little bit with some of this equipment, it may well be a less safe situation and have the need for you to slow down. However, I live out by Robertson Bridge area, and they just spent a year putting that bridge in on 199, and there was a lot of the time, in the evening or whatever, when there was nobody there, and you're limited to, I forget what it was, 40, I think it was, going through there, and it did seem a little ridiculous, but these we're not going to be changing the laws today, so.
And I think the main thing to remember is it really is a lot of times for the safety, and even though we don't see it, there's engineers that look at these things and they look at it truly from a safety standpoint, along with, I know there's some of the traffic safety groups that work up out of Portland State University that do a lot of studies on the traffic fatalities and the crashes and the injuries that result, and that's what a lot of this is based on. So even though, from a common sense standpoint, we look at it and we go, geez, that's goofy, why do we have to do that? But if you start finding out about the research and the studies they've done, and if you were to lose a relative as a result of something happening in a zone that you thought was okay to drive through at speed, something happened, a crash, and somebody died, I'm sure you'd have a different view on it, which is kind of how a lot of these things get put in place. So sometimes it seems silly, but when you dig into it and you get into the meat and potatoes of it, you realize there's a reason for it.
I have a razor in my bathroom where it's got a special tag on it where it's shown graphically that you're not supposed to, when it's plugged in, do not take a pair of scissors and cut that AC line. Really? Some lunkhead must have done this, and now there's a special sticker on it saying, don't shave your tongue or something. What? Okay, all right. So
Or do we still
you,
have gasoline cans that say flammable?
yes, and then others that say inflammable. Does that mean non-flammable, unflammable, or okay? It's Darwinism. The people that don't
Yeah.
know enough to stay out of a bathtub filled full of gasoline and then smoke, we don't need them in
And
our
use a radio.
society. Yes, that's right. I use a radio. Okay, so you're on anywhere in the state, anywhere in America, here in Grants Pass, you're on a road and you hear behind you and then you see behind you an ambulance with lights that are flashing. And the general rule is kind of pull over to the side and slow down to a crawl or stop. Okay, we kind of get that because you don't know if they're going to have to cross over the median line to get by you, and so you're all supposed to gently pull over without endangering anybody. What if it is one of these roads, we got a couple of them, where there's a median strip down the middle. I don't just mean a painted line, but it's got plants and stuff in it. Why in the world would you, they're not going to jump over all these plants. Why in the world would you slow down or stop on the other side of a concrete median ramp, area?
Right, and that specifically, I've had that situation. You're on 199 there in that strip between the college and before you go down the hill toward the Applegate River there, and it's got a big barrier all the way through it, and there's no way that emergency vehicle is going to be coming across, and yet I believe the law still indicates that you're supposed to pull over and stop.
And the hard part about some of these is, and Dale, I think you mentioned it as using good common sense, but part of it is not everybody's familiar with certain areas or certain roadways, and so if we let motorists decide, that they could use a barrier not to dictate whether they should or shouldn't pull over, we'd have some discretion issues and maybe sometimes some challenges. So when you use and apply a general rule of what motorists should do, it allows us to take out the, well, somebody thought this or thought that, and so we either have a crash with an emergency vehicle or we have them not able to get through traffic to get to where they need to deliver some sort of emergency service. And so general rules or blanket rules sometimes make it easier for people to understand what they should do.
The reason I bring it up isn't because I'm interested in barreling full speed through there, even though I don't think we're going to endanger anyone. It's the simple act of everybody trying to gently move over to the side and stop is creating an opportunity for some little fender benders right there.
Well, and so that's why the law also applies when safe to do so and to exercise due caution. So we don't want people jamming their brakes on and making a hard right to get out of the way. We want people to use good judgment. Our emergency vehicle operators have to really try to navigate, try to think what motorists are doing, and so we're asking everybody to use good judgment and common sense to pull their vehicles over so they can allow the vehicle to get through or get to where it needs to be.
So generally no drifting is allowed on Highway 199. Would I be right?
What do you mean by drifting?
Well, the driving where you purposely go around a corner and the back end is blowing around. They do this for fun. It was an attempt at humor, but it fell flat, of course. Okay. We think we know the answer to this. Where does a lower speed start or a higher speed start? Is it true that as I'm coming home and I see a 20-mile-an-hour sign in an area where there's almost never anybody there, I would imagine that the 20-mile-an-hour speed zone starts at the knife edge of that 20-mile-an-hour sign? Would I be right?
Generally, yes. Now, the The caveat to that is if you're already in a zone that's stay slow, you turn off of a side street and it's already a 20-mile-an-hour road, but you catch another sign, that doesn't mean that it just started there. It could be running that way for quite a while. So it's but if you're changing from one speed to the next, generally right where that sign is exactly where the speed would have to be adjusted and changed.
When you're, there's another area somewhere near me, but I mean, they're all throughout the city, and you come up to a four-way stop. We all know the rule. There's four cars that come up simultaneously to a four-way stop, that somehow the driver on the right, of course, if you're all simultaneous, then that's a debatable issue. Everybody's on the right. But the driver on the right is supposed to go first. But here's a specific example. You come up face to face, and you both want to make a turn down the right, down the same street. I'm making a right turn down that street. We're facing each other. We've arrived at this thing simultaneously. I want to make a right turn, and that guy wants to make a left turn. I think I'm correct in that I should get precedence when it's a tie because I've got the least amount of area to turn. He's got the most. I'm not going against two lanes, but he is. Am I right?
Yeah, the person making the right-hand turn would be have the right-of-way because the other person is crossing a road that has right-of-way. And part of the reason for that law is that what if your turn signal was just stuck on and you didn't realize it was on? The other guy starts to go, and then you go forward and causes a crash. He's crossing over with the left-hand turn over a lane that has right-of-way.
Thank you. The only reason I asked is, you're going to be safe. You give the other guy the benefit of the doubt or whatever. Except it happened recently. The other guy leaned on his horn. I get to go first, and I'm like, whatever, buddy. But no, I think that I was right in assuming that. Don't be belligerent about pushing. I had a girlfriend that said, "Well, I have the right of way to walk across the street anytime." I said, "That's what they're going to put on your tombstone. She had the right of way."
Yes.
Oh. What about when I first moved here, something that was symbolic of this county to me? You knew there was going to be some politics in this, you guys. When I first moved here, right out in front of the Ann Basker, there was an older fellow wearing a hat, a fedora. Okay, watch out for old guys riding around with hats in their car. And this guy was going the wrong way on the one-way street and honking at everybody. What's the matter with everybody? You're all insane. Well, that wasn't the problem. And I think of that as fairly indicative of some of our county government. No need for an answer from anybody but Mike. And so one of the questions that comes up is, do you really cite or warn slow drivers?
I think it goes back to Dale, what we talked about, a philosophy of traffic enforcement is public safety. So a slow driver is impeding traffic, and certainly today with road rage issues and other things, we want to make sure that traffic flows at the speed it's designed to. And so I don't think we have a policy to go out and cite them. We may pull them over to try to talk to them about it or educate them or see if there's another problem. So I would say that would probably be the best answer as to how we treat when we use the term slow. And slow is kind of a broad term, so definitely we would look at it if they were slow, like impeding traffic and creating a traffic hazard, traffic backing up, things like that.
One thing that's
also why basically rural roads, basically when I think it's 5 vehicles behind you that you're obligated to pull over when safe to do so to allow the vehicles to pass.
One of the things
I'm not saying that on a public road.
Sorry. One of the things about one of the things about the Parkway is the speed limit on the Parkway going out to Freddy's and Parkway Christian Center and heading out to I-5. The speed limit is 45 miles an hour, and so sometimes I'll find somebody in the left lane going 10. I've seen it happen, and I'm thinking this is not safe. Even 20 on a 45 zone just doesn't strike me as very safe.
Right, so that's the thing I was talking about. You know it when you see it, and that's why that the law exists also, that we don't have motorists who are impeding traffic and creating a traffic hazard.
Mike, you have anything to contribute on that one, bud?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I've seen it plenty of times and wondered about, what actually gets done there. But I get it. It is a safety thing. If it's clear, if it's blatantly dangerous, then that's time when somebody gets pulled over and gets a ticket. I was wondering also when he was mentioning about people coming here for the first time and turning the wrong way on one-way streets. I would assume that the first time that happens, you probably tell somebody to beware of one-way streets in Grants Pass.
Yeah, I think it's obvious to most of us that it's just a familiarity issue, and some people come into town obviously aren't familiar with the way the streets are and weren't paying attention to the signs or other things. So, yeah, it's an educational piece, and we certainly don't want them to be run out of town, if you will, just because they made a wrong turn or weren't paying attention since they aren't familiar with our streets.
Yeah, I did it, I confess, a couple of times at least when I first moved here, just being unfamiliar. Also, we wanted to know, do you guys sit outside of bars and lay in wait for drunks, or what's the policy on that?
Well, I've had conversations with people over the years about this. There's certainly statistics about how many people leaving the bars happen to be over a .08, different studies. The problem is if we were able to have the staffing to do that, why would you want to wait for them to get into the car and drive away if you had an opinion or suspicion they might be under the influence? So then our obligation would really be to prevent that before they got into the car. So, we don't, as a rule, have staffing that would allow us to sit outside of bars and try to make those observations or to pull them over as soon as they pull out. We do have DUI enforcement operations where ODOT funds some of our overtime to go out and enforce DUIs, and so we might see officers spending more time with those details down and around the bar areas, looking for possible or potential impaired drivers based on the way they're driving. But we certainly, from a preventative standpoint, would rather talk to someone before they get in the car and drive than to wait or try to sit out there and pull them over after.
Final question we have for you, both of you gentlemen, that's Deputy Chief Hamilton and Chief Landis. It's always a good idea to ask experts this question. What is the thing, the X factor, where if only everybody knew this about traffic laws, your job would be so much easier? What is that thing?
I guess part of it would be to always refresh and go back to the book and looking at the book to make sure that you remember, because over time, just like anything else, you drive long enough, you become complacent. So if people were to truly go back and look and understand why a lot of these laws get put on the books, it's like you said with the scissors and the razor. There's a reason that the laws get created, and unfortunately it's because somebody does something that is so egregious or bad that it causes an injury or a death, and the law gets created. And I think if people went back and looked at that and understood, it would be great to understand why the laws are there, and that is truly to make the roads safe, and really that common courtesy for everybody out there. If you've never been over into some of the European countries, their laws are fewer. And you watch them drive, and it looks like they're driving crazy, but you see very few crashes. Now, the crashes that occur are usually bad, but my experience in seeing them driving, it scared me the first time I watched until I realized I was in a European state for quite some time, and I saw just a couple of crashes out of all these people that were driving crazy, but the reason was they were focused on driving. They weren't distracted by cell phones or loud radios or cars that almost drive from themselves. But it truly comes back to that education and the knowledge and being aware of the traffic safety and just how dangerous it can be.
Anything specific from you, Chief Landis?
I think sometimes even with people who maybe haven't read a driver's manual in a while and stuff, we ask people to err on the side of caution, use common sense, and as Jim said, one of the biggest things I think affecting us right now is distracted driving, with all the different technologies and things that we have. And so people are going to have to use good discipline and realize that distracted driving is going to cause more accidents, more people are going to get hurt unless we figure out how to get a handle on that.
Now, if you two gentlemen will wait for a second, Mike and I are going to talk about you behind your back. Mike, I'm finding that these guys are pretty friendly. You know, in some areas of our country, officer friendly has disappeared, and I appreciate the fact that they were able to answer all of our questions and not give us some kind of officious brush off. What's your impression, sir?
No, this is very good information. I know that. I mean, we can't be the only people who are wondering about the stop signs in the Fred Meyer parking lot. You know, so no, this is good. All good information, and these guys were nice and full of
Something.
information.
Yes, right. You know,
Yes.
I also appreciate the fact that since we agreed to be part of the public information system for both of these fellows, the chief and uh, chief and the not sub
Deputy
chief,
chief.
deputy chief, right? That they gave us those get out of jail free cards because
Right.
those will really come up handy, especially with the way that Mike drives through town. Kind of belligerent, but you know what? Oh, by the way, just speaking of that, so I'm talking with some guy. We mentioned this on the show the other day, and the chief and the deputy chief will want to say nothing. I understand this. So, a fellow saying, "Well, I know one of these county officials that we used to go bar hopping together," and he said, "Oh, don't worry about the way I drive. I know all the local police, and they're not going to do anything to me. And you know, don't worry about it. Even if I've been drinking too much, there's not going to be any repercussions." So we don't know who the heck he was talking about. And so we appreciate the fact that you folks came on here and we talked about everything except politics.
Yeah, well, just so you know, our job is basically just to keep the peace and enforce the laws and to hope people get home safely. So politics is not part of what we're supposed to be doing. We got too much other things to do.
Well, I feel
Understood.
more peaceful already. Thank you both.